You are bleeding money right now, not in some dramatic, visible way, not through a single catastrophic decision. You are bleeding it in 7 quiet, respectable, almost invisible cuts, and every single one of them feels like the right thing to do. That is what makes this so dangerous. If you continue living the way you are living right now, if you keep following the same patterns, the same logic, the same comfortable routines, you will wake up at 45, maybe 50, with a body that aches, a savings account that mocks you, and a sickening realization that you did everything you were told and it still was not enough. That is not a prediction. That is a pattern, and it has a name. Niccolo Machiavelli identified it 5 centuries ago. He wrote that men are ruined most often not by misfortune, but by their own habits, habits they mistake for wisdom while the world quietly devours them. This video is not motivation. This is a surgical diagnosis. 7 specific things that are keeping you broke. Not because you are lazy, not because you're stupid, but because you have been trained to see poverty-building behavior as normal, as responsible, as safe. By the end of this, you will see each one clearly, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. That is either a gift or a curse, depending on what you do next. Before we dissect the 7 traps, you need to understand something fundamental about how poverty actually works. Not statistical poverty, not the kind measured by government agencies, the kind that lives inside the minds of people who earn decent incomes and still have nothing to show for it. Machiavelli studied Florence during one of the most economically volatile centuries in European history. He watched merchants rise and fall. He watched noble families crumble while blacksmiths built dynasties. And he noticed something that most people still refuse to accept. Wealth and poverty are not primarily economic conditions. They are psychological architectures. The broke person and the wealthy person can receive the same opportunity on the same day and respond to it in completely opposite ways. Not because one is smarter, but because they are operating from different internal blueprints. Your blueprint was installed early, by your parents, by your culture, by every teacher who told you to get a good job and save. That blueprint is not evil. It was designed for survival. But survival and wealth are not the same game. They are not even played on the same board. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that the man who adapts his way of proceeding to the nature of the times will prosper, and the man who does not will be destroyed. That single sentence contains more financial wisdom than most MBA programs. The times have changed. The economy you were trained for no longer exists, and the 7 habits I am about to expose are relics of that dead economy, still being practiced by millions of people who wonder why they cannot get ahead. Let us begin with the first, and arguably the most devastating. There is a transaction that most people enter into the moment they leave school, and they never question it for the rest of their lives. They trade hours for money, a fixed number of hours for a fixed amount of currency, and they call this having a career. On the surface, this seems rational. You work, you get paid, but here's what Machiavelli would identify as the hidden cost. When you sell time, you accept a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. Your income is mathematically capped. And worse, every hour you sell to someone else is an hour you cannot invest in building something that pays you without your presence. This is not an argument against employment. Early in life, a job teaches you discipline, exposes you to systems, and gives you capital to survive. The trap is not having a job. The trap is never evolving beyond the job. I watched this pattern destroy capable men for years. In the industrial corridors of the American Midwest, I met workers who had given 20, 25 years to the same company. Skilled men, reliable men, men who could diagnose a machine failure by sound alone. They were paid well enough to stay, never well enough to leave. And when the plant closed, as plants always eventually do, they discovered that their loyalty had purchased nothing. No equity, no transferable leverage. Just a resume full of hours sold to someone who no longer needed them. Machiavelli wrote that mercenaries, soldiers who fight for pay rather than for their own cause, are useless and dangerous because they have no reason to hold the line when the battle turns. When you sell your time with no ownership stake in the outcome, you are a mercenary in your own life. You fight hard, but you build nothing that is yours. The correction is not dramatic. it is gradual. While you work for someone else, you build something on the side, a skill set that compounds, a small venture, a body of work, anything that has the potential to generate value independent of your physical presence. Every self-made wealthy person I have ever studied made this transition, from selling time to owning output. Some did it quickly, some took a decade, but every single one of them made the shift. The question is whether you will make it before the hourglass runs out. This is the trap that catches the intelligent ones. The ones who are too smart to be obviously reckless, but not yet wise enough to see the cage they are building around themselves. Comfort is the most expensive thing you will ever purchase. Not because it costs money, though it does, but because it costs momentum. Every decision optimized for ease is a decision that bypasses growth. And growth, compounded over years, is what separates the wealthy from the comfortable. Here's how this plays out in practice. You are offered two positions. One pays $80,000 and requires you to do what you already know how to do. Predictable, pleasant, low friction. The other pays $65,000 but drops you into an environment where you are constantly stretched, constantly learning, constantly uncomfortable. You will fail regularly. You will feel incompetent. You will lie awake some nights questioning your judgment. Most people choose the $80,000. Every financial advisor, every parent, every sensible friend would tell you to choose the $80,000, and that advice will keep you exactly where you are. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the impetuous over the cautious, because fortune is like a river. When it floods, the man who built levees in advance survives, while the man who stood on calm ground is swept away. Comfort is calm ground. It feels safe precisely because it is exposed. I made this mistake myself. In my mid-20s, I had the option to join a chaotic, underfunded startup or stay in a role that was stable and well compensated. I stayed. For 2 years I was comfortable, and for 2 years I learned almost nothing. When I finally left, the gap between where I was and where I could have been was humiliating to calculate. The people who took that uncomfortable path, they had built skills I could not even name yet. They had networks I could not access. They had a tolerance for uncertainty that made them dangerous in the best possible way. Capacity is the asset that no one can take from you. Not a market crash, not a layoff, not a technological disruption. When you optimize for comfort, you are choosing to remain fragile in a world that punishes fragility without warning. This is the trap that social media engineered into a religion, and it is destroying an entire generation of men who would otherwise have a chance. Machiavelli warned that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. He meant this as advice for princes. Today it is the operating manual for an entire economy of illusion. You know the pattern: the leased car, the financed watch. The apartment chosen not for function, but for the background it provides on a video call. Each purchase individually defensible. Together, a financial death spiral disguised as success. I have witnessed this firsthand in every major American city I have spent time in. Young professionals in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, earning extraordinary salaries and living paycheck to paycheck. Not because the city is expensive, though it is, but because their lifestyle inflates faster than their income. Every raise becomes a nicer apartment. Every bonus becomes a vacation designed to be photographed. And beneath it, beneath the curated life, there is a quiet terror. The knowledge that one bad month, one unexpected expense, one economic downturn could collapse the entire structure. Because there is no structure. There is only surface. Machiavelli described this as the fatal error of displaying power before it is consolidated. When you project wealth you do not possess, you invite obligations you cannot sustain. You attract people who value your image, not your substance, and you trap yourself in a performance that demands ever-increasing funding. The wealthiest families in America, the ones who have held power for generations, are almost invisible. They do not signal, they accumulate. They understand something that Machiavelli articulated with brutal clarity: the appearance of strength without its substance is the fastest path to ruin. Stop decorating, start building. There is a myth that lives deep in the masculine psyche, and it is costing men fortunes. The myth of the self-made man, the lone wolf, the man who needs no one. Machiavelli would laugh at this myth. He spent his entire career studying how power actually functions, and he found the same principle operating in every successful state, every victorious army, every enduring dynasty. No one wins alone, ever. The man who refuses allies does not prove his strength. He guarantees his irrelevance. Leverage is the multiplier that separates linear income from exponential wealth. It comes in four forms: labor, other people working toward your vision; capital, money working while you sleep; code, technology that scales without additional effort; and media, content that reaches millions at zero marginal cost. The broke man uses none of these. He relies entirely on his own two hands and his own 24 hours. He is proud of this. He calls it independence. Machiavelli would call it a siege mentality, the strategy of a man who has already lost and does not know it yet. I spent years operating this way. I believed that if I could not do it myself, it was not worth doing. I coded my own websites. I managed my own books. I answered my own emails. And I was exhausted, underpaid, and falling behind people who were half as talented but twice as leveraged. The turning point came when I watched someone with fewer skills than mine generate 10 times my output. Not because he worked harder, but because he had built a system around himself. He had 2 contractors handling operations, a piece of software automating his client intake, and a content presence that brought opportunities to him while he slept. He was not smarter. He was not luckier. He had simply abandoned the ego-driven belief that doing everything yourself is a virtue. In the early American tech ecosystem, this principle played out on a massive scale. The so-called PayPal mafia, Musk, Thiel, Hoffman, and others, did not succeed because each was individually brilliant, though many were. They succeeded because they leveraged each other. They invested in each other's companies. They shared deal flow, talent, and strategy. They understood Machiavelli's core teaching about alliances. The right partnership at the right time is worth more than a decade of solitary effort. You do not need a Silicon Valley network. You need to stop believing that asking for help, hiring help, or partnering with someone diminishes you. It does not. It is the only way to escape the gravity of small-scale thinking. If what you are hearing is starting to rearrange something inside you, if these traps are uncomfortably familiar, then subscribe to this channel right now. We do not deal in comfortable platitudes here. We deal in the mechanisms that actually move a man from where he is to where he is capable of being. And we are only 4 traps in. The next 3 are the ones most men never see coming. This is the silent killer, the trap so deeply embedded in human psychology that most men do not even recognize it as a trap. They experience it as wisdom, as prudence, as being responsible. Behavioral economists call it loss aversion. The human brain experiences the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. This means that the fear of losing $100 is psychologically more powerful than the excitement of gaining $200. Now scale that up to life decisions. The fear of losing a stable job prevents you from pursuing work that could triple your income. The fear of losing your savings stops you from making an investment that could change your financial trajectory. The fear of losing social approval keeps you locked into a lifestyle you cannot afford and a career you have outgrown. Machiavelli diagnosed this with terrifying precision. He wrote that men hesitate between the desire to advance and the fear of danger, and in their hesitation, they are destroyed, not by the danger itself, but by the delay. I watched this destroy a man I respected deeply. He was a brilliant software engineer working in the American defense sector. Excellent salary, full benefits, government pension waiting at the end. He also had a side project, a logistics optimization tool he had been developing for years that had real commercial potential. Multiple people told him it could be worth millions with the right execution and backing. He never made the move. Every year he would say next year. The pension was too close. The salary was too comfortable. The risk felt too real. By the time he finally retired, the market window had closed. 3 competitors had built what he had conceived first. His tool was obsolete before it ever launched. He did not lose his money. He lost something far more expensive. He lost his timing. And timing, as Machiavelli insisted, is the one resource that cannot be recovered once spent. The correction here is not recklessness. It is calculated asymmetry. You look for situations where the downside is limited and survivable, but the upside is disproportionately large. You do not bet your life savings on a coin flip. You bet a portion you can afford to lose on an outcome that could fundamentally alter your position. The wealthy do not avoid risk. They structure it. They make small bets repeatedly, knowing that most will fail, but the few that succeed will pay for all the losses and more. The broke cling to certainty and call it safety, never realizing that in a changing world, certainty is the most dangerous illusion of all. This one will sting, because if you are watching this video, you are likely someone who values learning, someone who reads, someone who watches content like this and genuinely absorbs it, and that might be exactly what is keeping you broke. There is a phenomenon that psychologists call the illusion of competence. When you read about a skill, watch someone demonstrate a strategy, or listen to someone explain a framework, your brain registers a feeling of understanding. It feels like progress. It feels like you have moved closer to your goal, but you have not moved at all. You have simply become more articulate about the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Machiavelli made a distinction that most self-help culture has completely erased. He separated knowledge from capacity. He argued that the man who has read every treatise on warfare but never commanded troops in battle knows nothing of war. Because knowledge without execution is decoration. It is furniture in a house you do not live in. I know men who have read every book on investing and never purchased a single share. Men who have studied negotiation theory for years and still accept the first salary offer they receive. Men who can quote Machiavelli, Seneca, and Sun Tzu from memory, but cannot generate an independent dollar to save their lives. This is not learning. This is hiding. It is using the acquisition of knowledge as a substitute for the terrifying act of applying it. Because application means risk. Application means possible failure. Application means finding out whether you are as capable as you believe yourself to be. And that uncertainty is so uncomfortable that many men will spend an entire lifetime preparing for a moment they never allow to arrive. The antidote is brutally simple. For every hour you spend consuming information, spend 2 hours executing on it. Read a chapter on sales, then make 5 cold calls. Watch a video on investing, then open an account and deploy $50. Study negotiation, then negotiate your next bill, your next contract, your next salary. Execution is ugly, it is clumsy, your first attempts will embarrass you. That embarrassment is the price of admission to a life that actually changes. Machiavelli did not respect the scholar who studied power from a distance. He respected the man who seized it with imperfect hands and learned by doing what no book could teach. Stop preparing, start doing. The gap between your knowledge and your bank account is measured in actions you have not taken. This is the final trap, and in many ways it is the one that holds all the others in place. Because you can intellectually understand every principle I have laid out today and still fail, if the people around you are unconsciously pulling you back to the average. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the danger of one's circle. He warned that a prince is judged first by the men he keeps around him, and that the quality of a man's counsel determines the quality of his decisions. He was not speaking metaphorically. He was describing a mechanical law of human behavior. You become the average of the influences you absorb most frequently. This is not a motivational cliché. It is a neurological reality. Your brain calibrates its sense of what is normal, what is possible, and what is acceptable based on the behavior of the people closest to you. If the people around you complain about money but never study it, your brain registers that as normal. If the people around you spend everything they earn, your brain adjusts your own spending threshold upward. If no one in your circle has built anything, the idea of building something feels foreign, not because it is difficult, but because it is unfamiliar. I experienced this with devastating clarity when I changed cities in my early 30s. In my previous environment, success meant a stable paycheck and a reasonable car. That was the ceiling. Nobody talked about equity. Nobody discussed cash flow or asset allocation. The conversations revolved around sports, complaints about management, and weekend plans. Good people, kind people, people I genuinely cared about. but people who had collectively agreed, without ever saying it aloud, that this was as good as it gets. When I moved, I found myself surrounded, almost by accident, by people who operated on entirely different assumptions. People who discussed deals over breakfast. People who analyzed their expenses the way athletes analyze game film. People who treated every month as a strategic period, not just a stretch of time to survive. Within 18 months, my income had doubled. Not because I suddenly became smarter, because my definition of normal had shifted. The ceiling I had unconsciously accepted was replaced by a floor I had not known existed. Machiavelli would frame this as a question of court composition. He argued that the prince who surrounds himself with flatterers and the complacent will inevitably make poor decisions, because his information environment is corrupted. Your social circle is your information environment. If it is corrupted by low expectations, your decisions will reflect those expectations no matter how many books you read or videos you watch. This does not mean you must abandon everyone you know. It means you must be ruthlessly intentional about who gets the most access to your mind. Audit your 5 most frequent conversations. If none of them challenge you, stretch you, or operate at the level you aspire to reach, you have identified the invisible chain. Find rooms you are not yet qualified for. Enter them anyway. Listen more than you speak. Offer value before you ask for anything. Over time, your internal calibration will shift. And when it does, the other 6 traps become easier to escape, because the people around you will no longer be reinforcing them. You have now seen all 7, selling time instead of building value, optimizing for comfort instead of capacity, performing wealth instead of building it, refusing leverage because it feels like weakness, letting fear of loss govern every decision, consuming knowledge without executing it, and surrounding yourself with people who normalize mediocrity. Notice something. Not one of these traps looks like a mistake from the inside. Every single one feels rational, feels safe, feels like the mature, responsible choice. That is precisely what makes them so lethal. They do not announce themselves. They disguise themselves as virtue. Machiavelli built his entire philosophy on this insight, that the most dangerous forces in human life are not the ones that appear dangerous. They are the ones that appear normal. The prince who is destroyed is not the one who faces a visible enemy. It is the one who trusts the advisor who smiles while the kingdom crumbles. Your habits are your advisors. Your routines are your court. And if you have been following the default script, the one handed to you by a culture that profits from your compliance, then your court is compromised. But here is the part that Machiavelli also understood, the part that separates his work from mere cynicism. Awareness is the beginning of sovereignty. The moment you see the trap, you are no longer fully inside it. You may still be standing in it, you may still feel its pull, but the spell is broken. And a man who can see clearly in a world of the blind has an advantage that no amount of money can purchase. The path from here is not complicated, it is demanding. It requires you to choose discomfort over ease, execution over preparation, ownership over wages, leverage over ego, calculated risk over manufactured safety. And above all, it requires you to surround yourself with people who refuse to let you stay small. Machiavelli did not write for the comfortable, he wrote for the ambitious. For the men who looked at the world not as it was presented to them, but as it actually operated. He wrote for the man who would rather face an uncomfortable truth than live inside a beautiful lie. If you are still here, if you have listened to every word and felt it land, then you are that man. The question is no longer whether you understand. The question is whether you will act. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to do something that will take less than 10 minutes but may alter the trajectory of your next decade. Take a blank piece of paper, write the numbers 1 through 7. Next to each number, write the trap. And next to each trap, write one honest sentence about how it currently operates in your life. Do not lie to yourself. Do not soften it. Do not write what you wish were true. Write what is true, because that paper, that raw, honest accounting, is worth more than any course, any seminar, any guru's advice. It is your map, and every great campaign begins with an honest map. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. I would add, The first method for estimating whether a man will build wealth is to observe whether he can be honest with himself about where he currently stands. Most cannot. Most will watch this video, feel something shift inside them, and then return to the same patterns by tomorrow morning. The knowledge will fade, the urgency will dissolve, the comfort will reclaim them. But a few, and it is always a few, will do something different. They will take the paper exercise seriously. They will audit their circle. They will choose one trap to dismantle this month, just one, and then the next, and then the next. These are the men who, 5 years from now, will be unrecognizable. Not because they got lucky, not because they found a shortcut, but because they stopped doing the 7 things that were quietly guaranteeing their failure. Machiavelli's final lesson is perhaps his most important. He wrote that fortune controls half of our actions, but she leaves the other half to us. Half. That is an enormous amount of power, if you choose to use it. Most men surrender their half without a fight, then blame fortune for the outcome. Do not be most men. If this content reached something real inside you, if you are the kind of man who would rather be challenged than comforted, then this channel was built for you. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, because every video here is designed to do one thing: strip away the illusions that keep capable men from building the lives they are actually capable of. And leave a comment below. Tell me, which of the 7 traps hit hardest? Which one did you recognize immediately as the thing that has been holding you back? Be specific. Be honest. Your answer might be the exact thing another man needs to read tonight to finally make his move.